My next guest I had the privilege to sit down with is an advocate and has a passion for discussing mental and emotional health within trans masculine spaces. So, within this episode, we talked a lot about mental health and we talked about how there is lack of resources for masculine folks and how the mental health system is geared towards other folks and not necessarily masculine folks. And so I want this guest to come back for another episode where we can talk more in depth about mental health and what's needed in support for mental health. They advocate for mental and emotional health within transmasculine spaces, and so it's like, what would that look like? What resources do we need? And so, if you have any questions that you would like to ask of myself or this guest, please feel free to send those questions to hello@dembois.org. That is HELLO at DEMBOIS.org. And I would like to get questions because I want us to discuss this in more depth. And so if you listen to this episode and you're like, hey, I wish that you all would have touched on this, send our questions to us. And we plan to record a second episode where we can share all this information and we can talk more in depth about it, because this is a really good topic. And this is something that we don't talk about, right? We know there are lack of resources for us in the mental health area, but are we having those conversations at a large? And are we talking about policy changes? Are we talking about things that can shift culturally, right? That folks can get more access to care. So I hope that you enjoy this episode. Hello and welcome to Dem Bois Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Aaron, he, him, his, and I will be your guide throughout this journey on the show. This show is a platform where trans men of color voices will be amplified as we share our stories. Trans men of color are not monolithic. What that means is our journeys are not the same. We come from different backgrounds. We have different stories, family relations, chosen family, and most of all, we have different transition journeys. Visibility equals possibility. I like to say that all the time. We like to highlight on this show trans men of color businesses and entrepreneurs, parents, athletes, survivors, and many other issues and topics that are relatable to trans men of color in our existence. Dem Bois Podcast is not only a platform to amplify our voices, but to raise awareness and conversation around our lived experiences. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for supporting, listening, and sharing the show. Welcome to Dem Bois Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Aaron, he, him, his. My next guest is an advocate and has a passion for discussing mental and emotional health within transmasculine spaces. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Sean.
Yes, definitely. You
So,
want to go ahead and introduce yourself for folks? Name,
yeah,
pronoun?
yeah, absolutely. My name is Micah Roldan, he, him pronouns. 30 years old, Puerto Rican. Uh, I don't know what else you do. I'm a Capricorn. I'm an Episcopalian. Uh, let's see. I like long walks on the beach. You know,
Hey, you trying to be
I
on the
do.
podcast, or you trying to set up a date now? What's happening here?
No. I never know how to start these things. I'm married, so no, I'm not trying to be on a dating site. I've been married going on 10 years. Been with my
Good for
wife
you.
almost 14 years now.
Good for you.
Um, I just recently became a father, so that's been new and new in my life here.
Yes.
So yeah, you
Congratulations.
take it anywhere you want to. We could take it anywhere you want to take. Well,
Yes.
they're teenagers, so it's not no
Okay.
diapers for me.
Okay. Okay. All right. I was gonna say, yeah. Okay. So you're not sleep deprived.
Oh hell no!
Okay.
I was an uncle dad. I used to call myself Uncle Dad because my one of my nieces, she's 12. She's gonna be 13 this year. So now, she knows everything. She's like 12 going on 30. You know how these kids are now, like,
Yeah.
and she when my sister had her, like, you see, I was probably like 18 at the time. And I mean, changing diapers, taking her to daycare, taking her, picking her up from school, I did all the dad duties, but I was just the uncle.
Mm.
So I always felt like Uncle Dad. So now like it's kind of awesome, but also strange now to like not just be Uncle Dad and to like have these kids. Like when my daughter, I was going to adopt her. My wife and I was going to adopt her when she was 14, and she has some issues at home and stuff like that, and we tried to adopt her, and her mom, my wife's sister, so my sister-in-law didn't want us to adopt her because who wants the lesbian and
Hmm.
the trans guy to adopt their kid. And I mean, we're talking about like super religious people and everything. But she was just in a really bad situation. Her dad had passed, and things like that. And so my wife and I were like really like involved with her when she was, like I said, 14. And but her mom wouldn't allow us to adopt her and everything. And now that um she's older, now she's 19, and it was the most beautiful thing. Like last Sunday, she came to me. She was like, you've always been there for me. Like you and Titi have always been there for me. And like I look at you like a dad. And like, would you be okay with me calling you dad? And
Wow.
it was like, so kind of like we were talking about before you started recording. You try not to cry, especially like I felt like, if this is my daughter, like I don't want to be like crying in front of her and stuff. So I was just like, yeah, like I never want to push anything on you. Like, whatever you feel comfortable with, I'm here for you and stuff. And she's like, all right, well, you're my dad, and that's it. And soon as she left, bro, I lost it. I bawled because and then and our nephew who's 16, he had said something very similar to me, like, hey, like you care about me, you love me, you've been in my life right now for a while, and um like I see you more of like my dad than my biological dad and my stepdad, who does like nobody really like cares about me the way that you and like Titi care about me. And so basically they asked us to be their parents. Now the 16-year-old, that's gonna be a little bit more difficult legally, you know what I mean? But we're gonna do what we can there. So it's been a beautiful thing because like my wife and I can't have children, as 2 years ago I dealt with potential cancer scare, and I had to have like a hysterectomy and removed my ovaries because they had tumors in them, so they weren't going to function anyway. So not that I ever wanted to carry children, but still, like I had a thought in my mind of like, well, I could take my eggs or something, and my wife could be a surrogate, and we could have one biologically mine, one biologically hers, and she's got some health stuff going on. So like, biological children are just not in the cards for us, and that's okay. But it's been like, just oh my God, like just a beautiful thing now to like be able to be like, oh, like I can still be a parent even though I can't actually like have any kids that are biologically related to me. And kind of just like reignited the thought in my mind of fostering kids, which my wife and I have discussed before. My grandmother fostered kids when I was growing up, so I have a lot of cousins and family members that aren't biologically my family members, but my grandmother like fostered them for so long that they saw my grandmother as their mom. And so it kind of like reminded me of that, of like that want that I had to be a parent at one point, or to help kids in some capacity. And so you didn't ask for all that, but there you go. I had to tell you though, because I've been telling everybody now.
That's good. Thank you for sharing. Like really, thank you for sharing because that just shows that trans men can be parents and we can be fathers, right? So for folks that's listening and that who may not be trans identified and they're like, I don't believe it. No, it's true. We can be parents, right? That's how I fathered my child. He came with my last relationship and my marriage, right? That was her biological child. And he said some of the same things that you said that was said to you. Like, you love me and been there for me more than my own father. I love you more than my biological father. And he calls me dad. And
Yeah.
I never told him to call me dad. He's been calling me dad since he was a little kid. And so his
Hmm.
friends even call me pops or dad. So it's like to know that you can, be a parent to someone and not have them be biologically yours, says something about you as a person and your character. And we can be parents. So I'm glad that
Hmm.
you are a parent, you a father, and you can cry if you want to, because we talked about that. And I hope we
Yeah,
get into that within this episode. So to know that
yeah.
somebody sees you, that's just that the tears to me is a reflection of somebody sees me and I'm seen as his father to someone.
Oh man. I mean, when you say it like that, I mean, I didn't look at it like that of like somebody sees me because I think sometimes we can get too much of it into our ego, right? Of like, oh, like it becomes a trans thing of like, well, I am a man. Look how this kid sees me as their father. I'm a dad, and it didn't feel that way for me. It was more in a sense of like, I because this was at my mother's house over the weekend when they shared how they felt about me, and when they left, they went to go get some firewood because we're like Hispanic rednecks at this point, and and they went to go, my wife and them they went to go get some firewood, and when they left, I started crying. My mom's like, "Why are you crying, Poppy? Why are you crying?" And I was like, it hit me more in a sense of like I never thought I'd be good enough to be a parent. Never thought I'd be good enough to be a parent to someone. And so for a long time, for many years, I used to tell my wife, even when we first started dating, it's like I don't want kids. I don't want nothing to do with that. And also there was that, I'll never be able to have kids in this traditional way, right? As a cis man would, as a biological man would. So like I don't want them. And so more sense it was like, wow, like it was still the ego, but it just hit in a different way of like I'm good enough. Like these kids are choosing me. I didn't force it on them. I didn't tell them to call me dad. I'm not. I just like you said earlier. I'm just being myself. I'm being the caring, loving, compassionate person that I am, and that was noticed and in a sense reciprocated of like we see you in this way, so it's not more so from that if you want to take it from that gender way, the transgender aspect of it. It was more in a sense of like feeling validated, being good enough to be not just a son or a brother or a husband, but even a father, like to look after someone else. I mean, I look after my family, but it's different when you're looking after kids, or teenagers. I keep saying kids, but you know,
Yeah.
I guess I've reached the old age now that I can say kids.
You just 30. Come on. Hey, but you know what? It's easy to make a child. That's the fun and the easy. I'm gonna say fun if you enjoyed it, but it's the fun and easy part. Raising them is the hard part. So if you can do that part and they get to be 19 and say, I see you, hey, you did the hardest part, right? And so I enjoy being a parent. I enjoyed being a parent at times. And sometimes I was like, this shit is rough. I can sign up for this. But it's in reality, like I
Yeah,
raised a man and I'm proud of who he is. At first I was like, I don't know who this little motherfucker gonna be. This is hard work. I'm it's a toss-up. He can either be a good individual or not. I don't know. But I'm doing the best I can. But
mm,
now to look at him and he just turned 27. And now I'm a grandparent. So it's like, all right, he did all right. I did all right. We did all
yeah.
right in raising this child. So you said a redneck Hispanic. Where are you located?
I live in Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. Okay, so it's getting firewood. Is that something that's
Yeah.
normal or what?
No, but every time I think of firewood, I think of rednecks. I told my wife, I said, now I can officially say that I'm in my dad era. So now we're going down to shoe carnival or whatever the fuck, and I'm getting me some fucking cowboy boots and some Levi jeans and some fucking flannels. I'm already growing my hair out, as you can see. I'm already getting the slick back. All right.
You made
So I
it.
said, all right, now I have to be a mature man.
This is
I can't
funny.
be wearing my Jordans anymore and look like a little kid. Now I got to be a mature man. That's cowboy boots and Levi jeans and
That's
flannels. I don't know
funny.
why that to me was mature man, but that's where I'm going for now.
Okay, at 30. Wait, what you gonna do when you 40 and 50 then if you already achieving this at,
Yeah, I'm
at
gonna be a
30?
golden fox. I'm gonna be a golden fox at 40. The fuck?
All right. So I love to ask my guests their name and how their name chose them. So, Micah, how did your name choose you?
Oh man. I'm gonna say actually this been a full circle. It's funny you asked that because it's kind of like a full circle moment for me now. So originally, when I was trying to find that name, right? As a kid, I always loved the name Michael, right? And Mikael, right? But I'm definitely not a Mikhail. Like I'm not what I don't even know what I think that might be Russian. I don't know. I'm definitely not Russian, so it wasn't gonna work for me. Um, but Michael and Mikhail were like the two that really like called to me, especially like growing up. I grew up in a very like uh Catholic home. I'm not Catholic anymore, but I that's where I was how I was raised in a Catholic church, very religious parents. And the big one that my dad always brought up was Michael the Archangel. So I kind of always went back and forth between Michael and Mikhail. I don't know why those were just the two names that I always um kind of liked, but I'm like the more I kind of sat with it, the more I was just like neither of these names kind of fit me in my mind. And I was like, well, what about Micah? I don't know. Like, so Micah came about, and I was like, you know what? At the time, I was kind of in this like phase of life of kind of like not atheist, but not agnostic, which I know is kind of interesting because I know you see the cross on that I'm wearing, so it's probably like, what the fuck going on? But
No judgment here.
um, we'll go there though. We can get into it, but so I kind of came across that, and it was kind of at first, it was kind of just like, well, I like the name Micah, and then I looked up what the name Micah means, and in Hebrew it means he who is like God. And to me, it wasn't like I'm trying to be like God or I'm a God, but it was more of just like a humbling thing, in my opinion, of like it was weird because I wasn't really in that like I was still kind of in this phase of like I don't know if I really believe in God. I don't know if I really believe in a higher power. Like and like I had a lot of anger towards God and religion because of I think that's most of our stories in the LGBTQ plus community is the world tells you things about God and the world changes what they want to change to suit their narrative, and then it pushes you away from God, because you assume that God must be this way because the people who say they believe in God are this way, right? And they don't, you don't go and do your own like research or your own fellowship. You know what I mean? You don't go into any of that. So it wasn't really like it wasn't really for a religious reason. I was just kind of like, I like this name and this is, it means something to me. And I don't ever share my middle name because the internet's crazy and, it don't take much to find people. But my middle name was my father's middle name. And then my last name is actually my wife's last name. It was my like final fuck you to my father's side of the family because, when for me, back then, not transitioning yet, not really knowing what even being transgender was. I mean, people don't even, and you're older than me, so I'm sure is that, I mean, even 10 years ago, 12 years ago, like we weren't having these conversations. There weren't trans men out in the open. If you heard about trans people, it was trans women, and they didn't call them trans women. They called them, other names that people don't, like the term anymore. And I understand why, but that's what we knew them as, and there's or cross dressers, So we didn't, and especially growing up in as a person of color, like I saw I used to watch the Kings of Comedy and the Jamie Foxx show and all these other shows where you saw men dressing as women and it was a joke. You know what I mean? It wasn't a legit way that you could be. So at that point when I was dating women because I'd never been interested in men. I'd never been attracted to men in that way. Everyone just kind of gave me that label of you're a lesbian or you're this or you're that because or you're a butch or you're this. They gave me all these labels and once I turned 18 and found out that my dad who raised me wasn't my father, he wasn't my biological father, and I met my biological father and found him and everything like that. My dad's side who raised me, like they kind of all like they always treated us differently. Like my sister's the only one biologically related to the man that raised me, and they always you always kind of knew it. And based off of the way that we were all treated differently. I mean, there's four of us, and we are all four different, by different men. So when I changed my name after dealing with the stuff I dealt with, it was kind of like, why would I keep this name? Like, you guys don't give a shit about me, or like you guys have kind of turned your back on me. Like, I'm not gonna keep like and as the Bible says, a man leaves his family and he clings to his wife. So to me, I was like, this is the woman that that has been with me through everything, who supports me and who encourages me, who makes me a better person, makes me a better man. So like, I'm going to take her last name. And then we even joked about it. Like, she's like, well, what would you do if we got divorced? I said, well, I fucking earned that name. All the shit I done been through with you over the last fucking, over a decade. Like, bitch, this is my name now. The fuck? So that's how I got my name
Very
in a nutshell.
interesting. Yeah, very interesting. We kind of shared a similar story because, well, my name Sean is a derivative of my birth middle name, and my name Aaron was given to me by my son. So I never
Oh,
say this actually, but my last name that I was given at birth, which is my father's surname, is Heel. I cut that off 10 years ago. I don't even go by that. And I actually really need to get it changed. So I just go by my chosen name, Sean Aaron. And so because I don't associate with my father, so I want to carry his name around for it. And I hate when people say it. So I don't nobody
mm,
in that's listening to this address me by that because I literally cringe when I hear it. And I only use it when I have to when it's necessary for legal purposes, right? You're getting on a flight
right,
or at somewhere else where you have to the bank or whatever, right? But even then,
right.
sometimes I went yesterday to pick up my FedEx package and I showed him my ID. He was like, I don't see a package under here. I said, because I didn't tell you my name was here. I said my name was Sean Aaron. He was like, oh, I see that. Well, yeah, right. So I have that similar story with you of like, yeah, I'm gonna take this name. I think that's very interesting that you took your wife's name, right? Hey, this is Sean Aaron, the host of Dem Bois Podcast. Are you enjoying the podcast so far? Great. I'm glad that you are. Would you consider donating today to help support the continuation of this podcast? As you know, this podcast aims to serve as a platform to highlight and amplify the voices of trans men of color and share our transition stories. The podcast not only aims to amplify trans men of color voices, but it also raises awareness around our lived experiences. You would like to donate? Where can you donate? Great. I'm glad that you asked. Link in our description will take you directly to Network for Good, whom we've partnered with in order to collect donations for the podcast. Or you can visit our website. On the website, click the donate button, and from there, you are able to donate directly to the podcast. All donations are tax deductible. What does the donations go to? Oh, I'm glad that you asked. Your donation will help to support our production costs. We are working with Jasmine from Pink Lady Productions that brings you this awesome content. And also, we pay our guests an honorarium. Pay our guests an honorarium. Yes, we do. Why? Because as trans men of color, we would like to support and uplift each other and honor the time that's given out to come here and share their stories. So if you love this podcast, share and donate. See you on the next episode. Take care. And earlier we talked about things that masculine folks do or don't do, and you rarely ever see
Mhm.
that someone saying I took my wife's name. What? How do you feel about that? Like, what was there a conversation around it or what?
It was honestly, it was a non-issue for me. I think kind of like what I said to you before this we started recording is like people think too deeply about things and they try to find connections for their existence and to validate their existence and like it's pinnacle of their maleness or manhood, like it's so emasculated or masculating or effeminate to take your wife's last name, and it's like it's really not. I mean, it's just, for me it's really not. To me it was kind of a no-brainer of like, that's why I kept my father's middle name, because I didn't have an issue with my father. My father never treated me any differently than any of the other kids. You know what I mean? He didn't treat me any different from my sister, who's his biological daughter. He didn't treat me any different. So why I didn't want to sever that connection with my dad, which is why I kept the middle name. I just didn't want his surname, because that to me that's a part of your family, and I love them still. And there's still some people in that family that I talk to. Very rarely, when people die, that's when everybody comes and calls you. But you know, to me it was just a non-issue, and I felt like it was a step in owning who I am as a man on my own, but still connected to my partner. You know what I mean? Because I have no connection at that point to that side of the family. And so yeah, I don't really have any issues with it. And I wanted us, like, we had a conversation that we wanted to both have the same last name, and I didn't want to keep that last name. So it was kind of like, by default, I'm going to take your last name. Now, granted, my wife's last name is hyphenated, so she has two last names because, fucking Puerto Ricans. You can't just have one fucking last name. Because you get your dad's last name and your mom's last name, and then they hyphenate it. They can't make a decision apparently. So, but I didn't take both. I just took her like legit, like her last name, and I felt that her family, they at the time they opened their arms to me. They taught me a lot about affection. That's not something I was not an affectionate person. When my wife could tell you stories and she hated it, I was not an affectionate person, not because of my gender identity, but just me as a person. I'm not a very physically affectionate person. I'm not someone who wants to like whisper sweet nothings into your ear. Like that's just not me. I'm very like straightforward and like if you will, logical, and just like, okay, this is this, like, I love you because I've told you, and I show you with my actions. I do these things, and that's how like, what do you need me to like hug you in public and kiss you in public and do all these things? But you know her and her family, they taught me differently, because it made me realize how much trauma I had in my own childhood and with my family, because that my family is not like that at all. I mean, my wife could tell you, I could tell you how many, I could probably count on one hand how many times I've hugged my sister. You know what I mean? It was just not something that was normal to us growing up. Everything is very much like, I do for you, so you should know, because I do for you. And so, with that being said, again, I felt that it was kind of like a homage to my wife and her family, because they really opened that up for me, and were very like just open with me. It's like it was a no brainer for me to just do it.
I love that. I love that. I love that for you and anybody else who chooses to do that, right? And it's taken, and it's like, what do we say in society that we're telling a person, I'm gonna say a feminine identified person, to go and take this masculine person's name. So it's like, forget about who you was and take up my identity, right? So it's like, what are we actually saying in society about that when we don't
Hmm.
get? I feel like in a union, you should be able to talk about what it is that you both want. It shouldn't be like, oh, you just
Hmm.
gonna do this because that's how it go, right?
That's what's
No, like,
expected. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, do you really want to do that? We never, some people get married and don't change their name from their name before marriage, right? So it's like,
Hmm.
that takes a conversation too. Do you even want my last name? Like, you know what I mean? Does it have a ring to it? Like, you know what I mean? Like, does it
Hmm.
sound great? Like, how do I know? You shouldn't just take it because that's what's supposed to be. That's what's supposed to happen. Take it because you want
Right.
to, or because we had a conversation about it, or don't take it if you don't want to, right? That don't change that we're married or not, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, and then it costs money to go change your name anyway. So let's just take the free option.
Still cheaper. I mean, it's cheaper when you do it for marriage than when you do it the way we had to do it, like going to the court
Yeah,
and doing all that. Because you don't have to do that
you're
when
right.
you
Yeah,
when I changed my name legally. Like, I changed it with my wife's last name, so it
yeah,
wasn't like an issue. You know what I mean? I just changed my whole name in one shot. We were already married by the time I changed my name, so that was like you know, a whole other thing.
yeah.
Um, the funny part about it is, like, my wife and I, in the beginning of my transition, which was, over 10 years, almost 10 years ago now at this point, um, we we were on the verge of divorce, and I still had it in my mind that I was going to take her last name whether I was with her or not. I just, because I felt that strongly about her because it wasn't like there was, infidelity, or like there was love lost in our relationship. It was just difficult navigating this relationship during me transitioning,
Mm.
and what that meant for her and what that meant for our relationship. What did it mean for her as a lesbian? What did it mean in the context of our relationship? What does it say about me? Like, it was a lot of those conversations. But um yeah, I agree with you. I think that it should be a conversation of like, do you want to take this person's last name? Before I started transitioning, my wife was kind of like, I don't really want your last name, because she had a lot of the same reasons that I did. Like, you don't even fuck with your family. Why would I want your last name? That's the ties that you don't even with them half the time. You know what I'm saying? So it was like, yeah, you're right. Like, I can't even be mad at that.
That's a valid
I
thing.
don't
Like,
even
how can
want
you
it.
Yeah, how can you argue with that? You right, you sure right. You sure right.
Yeah,
I don't want it either. So you shouldn't have to take it
yeah,
just because, right?
yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So first I want to talk about transitioning in and being married, but I also want to ask you, like when we talk on the show, we always like to, discuss our transitions, right? But
Mhm,
rarely do folks talk about transitioning within a marriage. But I want to ask you this question
mhm.
first. When was it in your life did you have a sense of who you were?
I don't think I have a very traditional answer.
Mhm.
And you'll find that sometimes you're gonna have to like be like, okay, like move along, because I get into these long-winded ass answers because I feel like everything is has nuance. Like there's never like a straightforward answer. Um, but I think that we all, myself included, have this awareness that something's different, right? I know that I knew when I was young there was something different, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Because again, like this wasn't something that um was really out there, and what was out there was like not really the truth of how people experience transitioning. You do know what I'm saying? So, you know, I would say when I was a kid, I knew something was off. I didn't go for the stereotypical things. Like I didn't want to play with Barbies. I didn't want to play with really anything. I was more of a like, give me a fake guitar and I'd be in a fucking corner somewhere playing a fake guitar or something like that, But excuse me, but I knew something was different, but I didn't understand it. I didn't have the language for it. I didn't understand what it was. It was just like, okay, this is like I'm just different, but I don't know like what this difference really is. Um, I just knew that something was different. And so I'll give you an example. Like when I would play, I don't know if you remember that game, Def Jam Fight for New York. Okay, what it was, this was like a PlayStation, or like maybe it was like PS2. So it's not super old. But there was this game, Def Jam Fight for New York, and you could build your own fighter, like your own character and shit. And like I would always pick the dudes. Like I'd always pick guys. I always wanted to be the guys. And like I never wanted to be like the girl characters. But like again, to me, as a, probably at this point, probably like 8, 7, like I wasn't thinking about what does my gender mean. It was just like I like this character more. And I kind of look I wish I could look like that character, and he's super strong. You know what I mean? So I'm gonna be that character in this game. Or I don't know if you as a child, you ever look at yourself and you be like I don't like I look kind of like I don't look like what I think I look like. When you have that awareness, when you first look at yourself in the mirror, like we all have this idea of what we look like in our head. I mean, they there's like scientific uh like studies about this, right? Like your perception of yourself is not really like what you look like at all. Like you never really truly even see yourself. You're always seeing a reflection of yourself, and that's warped by what your perception of yourself is, right? So to me, when I first had that awareness of, oh, that's me in the mirror, it was kind of like, that's me in the mirror. But again, I didn't really like quite understand what that meant. And then, me being interested in women, and then also having that layer of being in a religious household where my father was very, like I said, like, I mean, very devout Catholic. My mother was a very devout Catholic. I mean, Sunday school, like communion, like women are like this, men are like that. It's man and woman. Anything else is like you're going to hell. Because that's what a lot of Catholics believe is like purgatory and all of these things. And so it really like stunted my not only my expression, but just even my curiosity, because it was like everything I'm going to do, I'm going to go to hell. So I can't do that. But I knew that I liked women, right? So back in when like AOL became a thing, and the, dial up, AIM and stuff like that. And I started going in these chat rooms and shit, and start talking to women. And then that's when like I'm like, oh, okay, like they're like I like this girl, chit chatting with people and everything. And I remember that was the first time I want to say I was probably like 10 or 11. My dad was watching something on TV, And I was the first time I ever saw two women kissing, and it was like some type of like reality show that was just like in passing. It was like a commercial, and it was very quick. And I remember looking at that like, oh shit, so like women be kissing. Like this was my thought process, like women be kissing, so like I'm not weird. Like women do be kissing, like that's not a weird thing. And I remember saying to my dad, like, then I because he got so pissed, like he changed the channel. He was like, that's disgusting. Like that, you're going to hell. Like there's people who are going to hell. And I remember looking at my dad and I was like, well, what if I was like that? And that was kind of like my first like put like dipping my toe into the water to see like what he would say because I obviously at that age I want my dad to approve of who I am, right? You want your parents to support you and be proud of you and all of those things. And he was like, "Don't ever say that, like that's a bad thing, people go to hell for that and all these things." And that so not only now was I in a crisis of like what I believe about religion and God, but now I'm in a crisis about my whole identity and what that means about because I like that, you know?
Hey, this is Sean Aaron. I'm the founder and executive director of Dem Bois Inc. I am also the host of Dem Bois Podcast. As you may know, Dem Bois provides financial assistance to trans men of color in order for them to obtain gender affirming surgery. We have great news. We're currently looking for volunteers to help support our programs. Our programs include our gender affirming surgery grant program and also our personal care package program. We personally curate packages filled with personal hygiene items. Just to name a few, things like tissue, soap, towels, toothpaste, and toothbrushes. We mail them out to trans men of color across the country who may be in need of help caring for their personal hygiene needs. We are looking for volunteers to help raise funds to support our programs. Also, we're looking for someone locally to the Bay Area to help us put all of the care packages together. If our mission is something that resonates with you and you would like to help support our work, just let us know. You can send an email to hello@dembois.org. That is HELLO at DEMBOIS.org. And we will get back to you with further details. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the next episode.
So like fast forward, my father passed when I was 12, and then fast forward, my aunt actually was the first person to say, if you're a lesbian, that's okay. And I remember asking her, "What are you talking about? What do you mean?" She was like, "Well, I know." She's like, "I know you like women. There's nothing wrong with that." And I was like, "But I'm not a lesbian." Like I was very angry about this. Like I'm not a lesbian, but I didn't know what to call myself because I knew it wasn't that. I'm just like, I'm not a lesbian. I just like women. So like to the outside world, it's like, then you're a lesbian. But to me, it was like, no, like I'm not a lesbian. It's just like women,
Like it
you
goes
know.
deeper than that, right?
But I didn't understand that, and I didn't have the language for that. And so, fast forward to high school, and I was in a relationship with a woman who was much older than me, which that's a whole nother thing in and of itself when you start talking about groomers and how we let things go a lot in the gay and lesbian community and certain things. Okay, because this doesn't just happen between straight people, not that you get where I'm going with that? Okay,
Yep,
because
definitely.
a lot of shit gets slid under the rug when it's, two women or two men when they say, oh, but they're two women or they're just friends, especially in Hispanic households when they don't ever want to acknowledge that you're with a woman and you're a woman. They'll say, no, that's your friend. That's not your partner. See what I'm saying? Um, fast forward, I'm in high school. I'm in like ninth grade at this point. So I was probably like 14. And I met a guy. I'm gonna say guy because I don't know how they identify, but at the time when I knew them, they said they were a man. But he always said that he was a cross dresser. That was the first time I had an experience of someone who dressed as a man and like being very feminine. And like I was already a very masculine woman, if you will. Like I played sports you know what I mean? I played sports. I was like, the typical like tomboy or whatever. Um, and so that was my first experience seeing, oh, like there are people that dress differently, you know what I mean? And that he's saying he's a cross-dresser, he's with these boys, he likes these guys, okay, he's telling me he's gay, he's just like this. And then, you know, but what is cross dressing? You know what I mean? So it was kind of like it was like very slow burn of like what like I'm still like I feel like that doesn't quite fit. 'Cause I'm not a cross dresser. You know what I mean? Like I like to, you know what I mean? I like to wear this or that, but I'm not a cross dresser. Like so I kind of just from I would say age like 15, well, I would say like 15 to 18, I just kind of like existed. I mean, at that point, I was a drug addict. I was an alcoholic. I was doing a lot of crazy. I had a lot of crazy things that I was just in survival mode. I wasn't even thinking about this stuff anymore. It was just about surviving. So like, I wasn't even thinking about none of that. And it wasn't until I was like 19 that I started seeing a therapist again. And that's when it started coming up of like explaining like, hey, this is how I'm feeling. And people always ask me if I'm a stud or if I'm a lesbian or I'm this. And I'm like, that doesn't feel right. And I used to work in an airport and people started calling me sir, like because of how masculine I was. And I remember being like angry at them. And I remember like just blurting out in therapy one day, like, they keep calling me sir, and I'm not a sir, but I should be. And that was like that light bulb moment of like, wait a minute. So what is that? Like, does that make like that's what it is? Like, what does that mean? And at the time, again, we still didn't have the words transgender. It wasn't trans men. It wasn't trans women. It was like, like you're a transsexual, you know what I mean? Or and this is the way this looks. And then it was like, okay, so I I did like a year blackout on social media, TV, everything, and was just like, I need to figure out what this is. And is like was in therapy and everything. And then, I got to a point where it's just like, I can't do this anymore. Like I have to like I got to a place where I knew that if even if it was the wrong decision for me, I could accept the consequences of that. But I had to try because at this point in my life, I had tried to take my own life, multiple times up to this point that it was like, I can't live like this. I'm not living. I'm existing. I'm in survival mode. I'm not happy. I don't like the way I look. I'm not who I want to be emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically. Like I am not happy with who I am. Like I have to figure this out. And so that's why I said, fuck it. I'm just gonna do it. And at that point I was 20, 21. And that's when I was like, all right, I'm gonna take this on. I'm gonna start medically transitioning and I'm gonna try it. And I'm gonna see how I feel because this feels like this is right for me. Like this is who I'm meant to be. And I, that's when I realized I could actually do this medically because I didn't think that that was even a possibility. It's again, it wasn't like there wasn't people like you or I on these platforms saying, hey, look, like if you want to, or this is what you're feeling, this is what you can do, these are the steps, this is what I did, this is what you can try. It may not be for you, but hey, like you only live once. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of it. And now here I am,
Wow.
all these years
So,
later.
so you began to medically transition how many years ago?
Back in 2015, so almost 10, so 9 years.
9 years. Okay, so
Yeah.
you've been with your wife for 10, but you've been dating for 14. So
Yeah.
right? Am
Yeah.
I
We've been
correct?
married. We've been married. It'll be 10 years this July. Will be 10 years
Okay.
we've been married.
Ooh,
And
it's
we've been
close.
dating. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So I want to say congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so I also want to say, so when you said, hey, I'm going to do this, I'm going to take this leap and I'm going to medically transition. What was the conversation like with your wife? How did that go?
That was horrible, bro. That
Oh,
conversation went horrible.
do share,
Um,
please.
so my wife, um, yeah, my wife was not thrilled about the conversation, but she was open to an extent. She was open. I have to give her that. She was kind of like, what does this mean? What does this mean? Like when I said to her, I said, I think I'm trans. I think I'm transsexual. And she was like, what's that? And I was like, well, like, I think seriously, I think I was supposed to be a man. Like, I don't think I'm supposed to be a woman. Like, and that was like a very like, okay, like, what the fuck does that mean though? You know what I mean? So, and that was kind of like in the like, I would say at this point, I was already kind of trying to understand more of it and talking to my therapist about it. And I was probably about 6 months into like really like thinking about it because I'm a very big thinker. I will think and think and think and think and overanalyze and figure out if I do this, what, this will be the outcome of this and this and this and this. And I'm that kind of like, I don't want to have a conversation about anything until I'm absolutely sure. And so at this point, I was probably in the talks about it and understanding of it about 6 months before I brought the conversation to my wife and was like, look, this is what I've been talking about in therapy. This is how I've been feeling. This is what I've been thinking. And I just want to, I just want to try some things, at home. I really want to see how I feel about these certain things before we go forward or before I go forward. But, I still wanted to like bring it to your attention. That was kind of how the conversation went. It was kind of like, at first, she was kind of like, okay, well, let's like kind of see how this goes because there wasn't really like a solidified decision at that point. But she was supportive of it. I just started feeling like I was living a double life because, at home, with my friends who knew it was like I'm Micah or I'm Mike, my wife was not there yet. So she did not call me by he, him pronouns. She did not call me by the chosen name or anything like that. But she did help me in terms of like, when I was like, hey, what do you think about this name or that name? She'd be like, no, I don't really like that. Or I could kind of see that. So it was much more of a slower process for her to really like be on board in a sense. And so one day I remember her and we were, I was in the shower and she came in the shower and no pun intended. She came in the shower and we were just talking, and I was bawling my eyes out and she was like, what's wrong? And I was like, I can't live like this anymore. Like I don't this I'm not living. I don't want to be like this anymore. Like I have to try this. I have to do this. And we'll just have to like wherever that lands you is how it'll land you, and we'll go from there. And so once I started taking testosterone, at first she was still kind of like like about it. Um and one day when my voice dropped, it's like she freaked the fuck out because it wasn't like I was like that stereotypical pubescent boy. Like I had this my normal voice, like I had like my old voice, if you will. And then one day it was just like, yo, and she was like, what the fuck? And she was like, what are you doing with your voice? Are you doing it? And I was like, bro, I was taken aback by my own voice when it came out my mouth because I wasn't expecting that shit. That shit came all the way from my motherfucking chest. I was like, hello, hello. And I was like, I'm not doing, and I just kept talking. I was like, I'm not doing that. It's just doing it. And she was like, seriously, stop doing that. I was like, I'm not, what do you mean? Like, it's just happening. I'm not doing nothing. I'm telling you, I went from this high pitched teenage boy voice to like, man, I was like, oh shit, I don't know how that happened, but all right, we'll take it. And that's when the problem started. That's when the problem started. In our relationship because she's staring at me over there. She's like, "Hey, you giving him all the tea? We giving you all the tea,
like, you
Sean."
telling our goddamn business.
Yeah, she looked over like, "Motherfucker, man, not make me look bad."
So we have reached the end of this episode. Thank you for tuning in and listening to part 1. So be sure to tune in next season for part 2 as we continue our conversation. So we have reached the end of this episode. I want to say thank you for listening to Dem Bois Podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Sean Aaron, he, him, his. Be sure to visit our website at dembois.org. That is DEMBOIS.org. If you would like to connect with us, be sure to follow us on Instagram or Facebook. If you think you would be a great guest on the show, or if you know somebody you think would be a great guest on the show, there's multiple ways to request to be a guest on the show. First is you can go visit our Instagram page, click the link in our bio, and from there you'll be able to request to be a guest on the show. Or you can visit our website, click the programs tab up top, scroll down to podcast, click the podcast button, and from there on the podcast page, you'll be able to request to be a guest on the show. Yo, we need questions, y'all. If you have those burning questions, a question that you want to ask me or a future guest on the show, there's multiple ways that you can send in questions, right? So first, you can go to Instagram, DM us that question, or you can email us at hello@dembois.org. That's HELLO, like hi, at dembois.org. Be sure to like the show. Be sure to share this show out with your friends and other folks in your networks. So until next time, take care.